Chapter 13. I was like Mama. I didn't think Lisbeth seriously would be any help around the place. She was too little and too skinny. I figured she'd just be an extra bother for Mama. But we were wrong. Just like Bud Searcy said, she was a big help. She could tote water from the spring. She could feed the chickens, pack in wood, cook cornbread, wash dishes, wash little Arliss, and sometimes even change the prickly pear poultice on my leg. She didn't have to be told either. She was right there on hand all the time, just looking for something to do. She was a lot better about it than I ever was. She wasn't as big and she couldn't do as much as I could, but she was more willing. She didn't even back off when Mama hooked Jumper to the cart and headed for the field to gather in the corn. That was a job I always hated. It was hot work, and the corn shucks made my skin itch and sting till sometimes I'd wake up at night scratching like I'd stumbled onto a patch of bull nettles. But it didn't seem to bother Lisbeth. In fact, it looked like she and Mama and little Arliss had a real good time gathering corn. I'd see them drive past the cabin, all three of them, sitting on top of a cartload of corn. They'd be laughing and talking and having such a romping big time playing with the speckled pup that before long I half wished I was able to gather corn too. In a way, it sort of hurt my pride for a little old girl like Lisbeth to come in and take over my jobs. Papa had left me to look after things. But now I was laid up, and here was a girl handling my work about as good as I could. Still, she couldn't get out and mark hogs or kill meat or swing a chopping axe. Before they were finished gathering corn, however, we were faced with a trouble a whole lot too big for any of us to handle. The first hint of it came when Spot Heifer failed to show up one evening at milking time. Mama had come in too late from the corn gathering to go look for her before dark, and the next morning she didn't need to. Spot came up by herself, or rather, she came just to the house. I heard her first. The swelling of my leg was about gone down. I was weak as a rain-chilled chicken, but most of the hurting had stopped. I was able to sit up in bed a lot and take notice of things. I heard a cow coming toward the house. She was bawling like cows do when they've lost a calf or when their bags will stretch too tight with milk. I recognized Spot's voice. Spot's calf recognized it too. It had stood hungry in the pen all night, and now it was nearly crazy for a bait of milk. I could hear it blatting and racing around the cow pen, so starved it could hardly wait. I called to Mama. "Mama," I said, "better go let old Spot and her calf. I hear her coming." "That pesky Spot," I heard her say impatiently. "I don't know what's got into her staying out all night like that and letting her calf go hungry." I heard Mama calling to Spot as she went out to the cow pen. A little later, I heard Spot bellow like a fighting bull, then Mama's voice rising high and sharp. Then here came Mama running into the cabin, calling for Lisbeth to hurry and bring in little Arliss. There was scare in Mama's voice. I sat up in bed as Lisbeth came running in, dragging little Arliss behind her. Mama stopped, slammed the door shut, then turned to me. "Spot made a fight at me," she said. "I can't understand it. It was like I was some varmint that she'd never seen before." Mama turned and opened the door a crack. She looked out, then threw the door wide open and stood staring in the cow pen. "Why, look at her now," she said. "She's not paying one bit of attention to her calf. She's just going on past the cow pen like her calf wasn't there. She's acting crazy as if she'd got hold of a bit of pea vine." There was a little pea vine that grew wild all over the hills during wet winters and bloomed pale lavender in the spring. Cattle and horses could eat it, mixed with grass, and get fat on it, but sometimes when they got too big a bait of it alone, it poisoned them. Generally, they'd shamble around with blind staggers for a while, then get better. Sometimes, though, the pea vine could kill them. I sat there for a moment listening to Spot. She was bawling again, like when I first heard her. But now she was heading off into the brush again, leaving her calf to starve. I wondered where she could have gotten enough pea vine to hurt her. "But Mama," I said, "she couldn't have eaten pea vine. Pea vine is all dead and gone this time of year." Mama turned and looked at me, then looked away. I know. That's what's got me so worried. I thought of what Vern Sanderson had told me about animals that didn't act right. I said, "Cows don't ever get hydrophobia, do they?" I saw Lisbeth start at the word. She stared at me with big, solemn eyes. "I don't know," Mama said. "I've seen dogs with it, but I've never heard of a cow brute having it. I just don't know." In the next few days, while Old Yeller and I healed fast, we all worried and watched. All day and all night, Spot kept right on doing what she did from the start. She walked and she bawled. She walked mostly in a wide circle that brought her pretty close to the house about twice a day, then carried her so far into the hills that we could just barely hear her. She walked with her head down. She walked slower, and her bawlings got weaker as she got weaker, but she never stopped walking and bawling. When the bull came, He was worse and a lot more dangerous. He came 2 or 3 days later. I was sitting out under the dog run at the time, and I hobbled out to sit in a chair beside Old Yeller where I could scratch him under his chewed off ear. That's where he liked to be scratched best. Mama was in the kitchen cooking dinner. Lisbeth and little Arliss had gone off to the creek below the spring to play with the pup and to fish for catfish. I could see them running and laughing along the bank, chasing after grasshoppers for bait. And then I heard this moaning sound and turned to watch a bull come out of the brush. He was the roan bull, the one that the droopy-horned Chongo had dumped into the Mexican cart the day of the fight. But he didn't walk like any bull I'd ever seen before. He walked with his head hung low and wobbling. He reeled and staggered like he couldn't see where he was going. He walked head-on into a mesquite tree, like it wasn't even there, and fell to his knees when he hit it. He scrambled to his feet and came on, grunting and staggering and moaning, headed toward the spring. Right then, for the first time since we brought him home, Old Yeller came up off his cowhide bed. He'd been lying there beside me, paying no attention or sight of the bull. Then, I guess the wind must have shifted and brought him to the bull's scent. And evidently, that scent told him for certain what I was only beginning to suspect. He rose with a savage growl. He moved out toward the bull, so trembly weak that he could hardly stand. His loose lips were lifted in an ugly snarl bearing his white fangs. His hackles stood up in a rugged ridge along the back of his neck and shoulders. That's when their dog's hair stands up on their back. It looks like it kind of puffs up. Watching him, I felt a prickling at the back of my own neck. I'd seen him act like that before, but only when there was the greatest danger. Never while just facing a bull. Suddenly, I knew that Mama and I had been fooling ourselves. Up till now, we'd been putting off facing up to the facts. We were hoping that the heifer Spot would get over whatever was wrong with her. Mama and Lisbeth had kept Spot's calf from starving by letting it suck on another cow. They'd had to tie the cow's hind legs together to keep it from kicking the calf, but they'd kept it alive, hoping Spot would get well and come back. Now, I knew that Spot wouldn't get well, and this bull wouldn't either. I knew they were both deathly sick with hydrophobia. Old Yeller had scented that sickness in this bull and somehow sensed how fearfully dangerous it was. I thought of Lisbeth and little Arliss down past the spring. I came up out of my chair calling for Mama. "Mama," I said, "bring my gun, Mama." Mama came hurrying to the door. "What is it, Travis?" "That bull," I said, pointing. "He's mad with hydrophobia and he's headed straight for Lisbeth and little Arliss." Mama took one look and said, "Oh, my Lord," in almost a whisper. She didn't wait to get me my gun or anything else. She just shot out for the creek, hollering for Lisbeth and little Arliss to run, climb a tree, anything, get away from that bull. I called after her, telling her to wait, give me a chance to shoot the bull. I don't guess she ever heard me, but the bull heard her. He tried to turn on her, stumbled, and fell to his knees. Then he was back on his feet again as Mama went flying past. He charged straight for her. He'd have gotten her too, only the sickness had his legs too wobbly. This time, when he fell, he rooted his nose into the ground and just lay there, moaning, too weak even to try to get up again. By this time, Old Yeller was there, baying at the bull, keeping out of his reach, but ready to eat him alive if he ever came to his feet again. I didn't wait to see. I went and got my gun. I hobbled down to where I couldn't miss and shot the roan bull right between the eyes.